Hi, and welcome to Court. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Sacha de Boyle, Director of the Court International Festival of Literature, and I'm really excited to be introducing you to our first ever digital festival. I hope you enjoyed this event, and if you do, why not take a moment to see what else we have in store online at court.ie. All our events will be broadcast live until the 25th of April, but if you want to watch or listen again, you can find them all online on our website, our SoundCloud, or our YouTube channel. Please feel free to join the conversation on social media. We'll be using the hashtag Court2020 across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram throughout the weekend. If you'd like to make a donation to support Court, you can do so at court.ie/support us. And after the event, we'll be sending out a post-event survey and would be very grateful if you were able to fill this in. We can't be there with you, but we hope we can bring a little of the Court spirit to you wherever you are in the world. Thank you.
Many thanks for the warm introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure to take part in this brilliant and innovative festival. Just before I introduce the stars of the show, our fantastic poets, I'd like to give a little bit of a background to the event today. Mothertongues is part of an ongoing series of conversations about language and poetry. These conversations began last year when UNESCO declared 2019 the International Year of Indigenous Languages. With support from a number of organisations, including Welsh Government, Wales Arts International, Arts Council Northern Ireland, Creative Scotland, British Council Wales and the Scottish Poetry Library, Literature Wales, my organisation, has been able to support and facilitate these creative and poetic conversations. So today it's my privilege to introduce the event and the three fantastic who will be taking part. First of all, we'll have a short conversation with each about their work and backgrounds, and then we'll get to hear some of their poems. English language translations will magically appear on screen during these readings, and if you've never heard Welsh, Scots Gaelic or Irish poetry read aloud before, you're in for such a treat. The first poet we'll hear from is Ciara. She's the writer-in-residence at Dublin City University and is the founder of REC, a monthly multilingual spoken word and open mic night in Dublin. She's performed internationally in Berlin, New York, London, Brussels, Sweden, and across Ireland, and she's an Irish Writers' Centre ambassador. The video for her poem, Phenomenal Woman, a 2018 commission about the Ladies Gaelic Football Association, has been viewed over 300,000 times. Then we'll hear from Pàdraig MacAoidh. Born on the Isle of Lewis, Pàdraig is a poet, academic and broadcaster. He has a PhD in English literature and lectures on Scottish and Irish literature at the University of St Andrews. He has two collections of poems, Glyn and Nadwr. I probably mispronounced them, but he'll correct me later. He co-edited a book of 500 years of rude and transgressive Gaelic poetry, which he described as basically anything that might bring a blush to your cheek, which went on to win the Gaelic Book of the Year, amongst other accolades. Let's hope this is after the watershed. Finally, we hear from Ifor ap Glyn, National Poet of Wales. Born and bred in London to Welsh parents, Ifor is a multi-award-winning poet, presenter, director and producer. He has twice won the crown at the National Eisteddfod and has won several BAFTA Cymru Awards for his work as a television director and presenter. Ifor has represented Wales in festivals and events around the world, including Cameroon, Lithuania, China, Belgium, Germany, Scotland and, of course, Ireland. As national poet, Ifor has been commissioned to write poems to mark a number of occasions over the past few years, including the 50 years since the Aberfan tragedy, 20 years of devolution in Wales, social appeals, birthdays, and, of course, the highlights, the many highlights of the Welsh football team. Ciara, we'll begin with you, if we may. Your route into language, your own mother tongue, is not what we'd consider a traditional one. Could you talk to us about your experience of the Irish language and how you were led into it?
Thank you, Clecky. Well, mother tongue is usually used to describe your first language or the language of your ethnic group. So for me, I suppose in a way it's neither, because it's not my first language and a lot of Irish people don't speak Irish. So it's kind of a complicated relationship that a lot of Irish people have with the language, myself included. So the people who do speak Irish, I'll keep this broad because I know people are watching it all over the world. They're called Gaeilgeoir often, and that just means that you're an Irish speaker. And there's kind of an assumption that to be a Gaeilgeoir, you're probably either raised with the language or you had your education through the language, or maybe you play traditional Irish music, or some mix of all of those. But it's definitely, you're not expected, if you didn't follow one of those traditional routes, to be able to speak Irish. So the second poem that I'll be performing today actually deals with those kind of tropes. So personally, I wasn't raised bilingually. I was raised in a house where English was spoken, and my education was through English. And I don't play traditional Irish music. So what happened to me? Why am I different? Well, when I was in sixth class, which is about 12 years of age, I had teachers who just kind of taught Irish really as part of the framework of our culture. So we did music and dance and poetry, and not in the what does this poem mean kind of way, in a fun, let's all write poems kind of interesting way that made the language feel so alive for me. So I just really started understanding Irish as part of our heritage. And then I went to Irish College, which is a summer camp where people go to the Gaeltacht regions where Irish is still spoken daily. And they live in the language, and they have classes, and they go to céilís, and they play sport and learn songs. And I really felt, again, even closer to my culture, because I know I did speak about a lot of Irish people not speaking Irish, but it is still very embedded in our culture. So in a way, it's a necessary key to unlock an understanding to your own culture fully. So thinking about it, another huge factor would be that my parents definitely placed a value on the language. And I definitely felt as I progressed year after year in learning Irish that this was something they were proud of. I'd hear them telling their friends, oh, Ciara has learned, she speaks Irish, or she can understand this. And they'd get me to translate things on road signs, and they'd be so proud that I could do that, which is a huge driving factor in learning the language. And it's unique because they easily could have been some people who didn't put value on the language. And I'll touch on that actually in my first poem. There are people who don't value Irish and in Ireland. And that's to be expected in a way, because we are a small nation and a post-colonial nation. And there is a certain level of cultural cringe amongst certain people. But I'm lucky that I didn't have that, and that I was able to learn Irish. So yeah, then that only brings me up to being about 18. And I was about to start university, and I thought about what I wanted to study, but it occurred to me that if I didn't study Irish because of my background and because I had no sort of framework in my life in which to use the language, that if I didn't carry on in an institutional setting with Irish, I didn't see how I would have the language in my life, and it wasn't something I was ready to lose yet. So I chose to study English and Irish at university. And then, for the first time in my life, I had friends in my real life who spoke Irish, and my real life became bilingual. So Irish moved from being just in the classroom to being, and the summer camp as well, to finally just being part of my daily life. I'd wake up and I'd get a text in Irish, or I'd meet people for coffee and we'd be speaking Irish. And ever since then, I have a community. And I think that's really important, just to have people who share that linguistic worldview, that you can reference things, you can make jokes, you can really express yourself fully in that side of you. So I've lived abroad since then. I've lived in London and in Philadelphia. And at the time, I had to create my own communities using books and poetry and social media to try stay in contact with the language. But now I'm back in Dublin, and obviously not now. I can't do anything right now. So I do really feel that absence of a community. And it's made me think about, my journey with the language and how far I'm willing to go to continue to speak Irish.
I think when I was first introduced to the Irish language, there was a lot of interest in West Wales, where I was brought up. We did have a bit of an old-fashioned view of the Irish language, particularly Irish language poetry. There was always lots of big beards and very small hats. And when I was lucky enough to be introduced to your amazing work, Ciara, I can see it's very different, and that perhaps we had a bit of we did have an old-fashioned view of the poetry. And I've, through you, I've come to see that the spoken word poetry scene in Dublin is multilingual and thriving. Can you talk a little bit about, the open mic nights that you set up, and what would you say are the influences in your work as a young contemporary poet?
Well, I might have a beard if I could grow one, but unfortunately I remain smooth. When I lived in London, it was 2014, and I started going to open mic nights. And, of course, it being London, there's just a huge multicultural element to anything that happens there. And when I came back to Dublin, I wanted to continue performing spoken word poetry. And at the time, I was only writing that sort of poetry in English, which is interesting because, it's kind of similar to what you thought. I didn't see that this was something that there was even an avenue for in Irish. So when I came back, then around 2015, I set up Rec, a spoken word night intended really to just be a showcase for people that I had admired around Dublin and around Ireland. So Seamus Barrow O'Sullivan from Listowel and Kerry, the rapper MC Muppade from Connemara, Marcus McNeil, Ompi O'Murchu, just different poets who I found very interesting, and I wanted to know more about where their work was going. And apart from Irish-speaking poets, there's a huge scene in Ireland as well of spoken word. Like Stephen James Smith was making waves with his poetry and his videos, John Cummins, Emma Kieran, and I always loved Kate Tempest as well. I'm so embarrassed to talk about Kate Tempest because she's too amazing, but I'd be embarrassed not to mention her at the same time. There's a festival in Ireland called Imram, which is an Irish language festival, and they create really interesting poetry events, but it's all very engineered, and they happen on an irregular basis. So you could go and attend and see somebody, performing with the double bass or something really interesting, but that would happen twice a year. And I would just wonder, where are these poets for the whole year? And how can I create something regular where not only will those poets come and perform, but then other people like me can have a chance to get up on stage and share what they're putting together, because I really didn't feel like there was anywhere for me to do that in Irish. There's kind of a barrier. There was these amazing poets that I really admired, and then there was stuff I was creating, but I didn't know what to do. So yeah, I set up Rec, and I called it multilingual. And the reason was I just didn't want anyone to think if a poet who writes in English came to the night and wanted to hear Irish language poetry, I wouldn't want them to not share their own poem with us. So it's multilingual, so people would get up and share their own work in French or English or Spanish or whatever language they do speak. So there is a nice give and take with that as well. So that was 5 years ago, and I didn't think that I was going to be setting up an event that would run for 5 years. But it's still happening really regularly, and there's still an interest, and there's poets who have been writing and regularly attending the whole time. So there's a great sense of growth and community. So we've been to music festivals, we've been all around Ireland. I've done projects with the Irish Writer Centre of Fish Danta, video poems. And for those, we had the chance to work with fantastic videographers, with musicians and other artists. And yeah, I think it's just something I'm really proud of, and I hope to see it going forward. I'm a little bit sad because our 5th birthday was cancelled because of the virus, but we'll be back. And in the meantime, actually, Rec is on next Thursday for for Poetry Day Ireland on Zoom. So anybody watching this will be able to tune in if they want to see and hear from some of the wonderful poets that I've been describing.
Fantastic. Well, a well-timed plug there for your brilliant evening. So now, may we hear some of your poetry, Ciara?
Yes, thank you very much. So this is a poem called Seasamh na Mná Galanta, the party line. And it's what I was talking about earlier when I said some people have a cultural cringe or they have a negative view of the Irish language. This is a poem about an experience I've had like that. Seasamh na Mná Galanta. Taréis tamil de chórá le ban bhrá atá ag mullam a chuid se filiachta ag seola irishe. Deram leihí go scríbam an Gaeilge chomh maith. Fecum scamwil in a suila. Agus is cuma faoin a fragra caréiseach. Clusham a torum go glé. Dar léhi go bhfuil me os cion na le héad. Níos déine, nar a háin na far céile a láb hash im a bhus, is liganwé gnúsacht mar vannacht. Déanam lán mahúil a bhaintas, agus cuimhníam gur minic don hrá a bheith dal. So that's the first one done. The second poem is called Ein Cur, which is like black sheep. And this is the poem I was talking about earlier when I said that some people, you know, they'd look at me as a black sheep, like, why do you speak Irish if you don't come from a family who speaks it or have certain other elements in your background that would make it make sense for them. So I wrote this specifically for this project, both of these actually, that I was working on after spending a few days with Peter and Ifor, and the three of us just talking about our relationship with the language and how other people in our countries or around the world feel about our languages as well. Ein Cur. Scuran ein as gach alta. Sin maragra shasta inu rialta na nini a aulamíon, nar tógu le gailge mé, nar rastal mé Gael skull, na nar chein mé irid is rial a bháin riamh im a héal. Nach ann don a buntáistí breise sin im a chúlra a bhí nóach dómh marúil sa Gaelge. An cheist a leanan ná, cén fá a Gaelge. Ní ann déin chúis a bháin, tosach néta an scéal níl le fáil, is omí cur sa tail, imíon an tám me rohí, stricter ceann scríbe. Cén fá, míle mion rawa do echa is tócha, I measc rírá na milliún rawa eile a chuníon an rotha mór seo ag buga. Sin a thugann seo a nocht mé, sa rucht seo, fila Gaelge os for góir, ag cugant na ceiste, cén fá. Gom a leiscéal gan leiscéal glán a bhrunna oribh. Seo ceist, mar ragra. An bhfuil sibse ag fifridíam faoi mo chud Gaelge, na faoi mhór naspa. Agus an ceann deireanach, this last one is called leiscéalta, and that means excuses, and it's kind of touching upon how people say they want to speak Irish, but then they have all these reasons why they don't speak Irish. But then I think they actually really do want to speak Irish. Leiscéalta. Deirtar. Bevrálinn an Gaeilge a labhairt. Ach. Cuirtar an lucht roch bhúntóirí, an mó canílach, an tiisiil ginneadach. Mar sin hain, na daoine céine, déanann siad iirecht lena gcuid páistí, seoltar iad chuig Gaelcholáistí, agus tréis na mblianta fágann siad sin an scoil, líofa, a rá. Bevrálinn an Gaeilge a labhairt, ach. Cuirtar an lucht aspa deisina, aspa tiiscina, aspa úsáide. Mar sin hain bí cínta, sa chéad déanár revela, go mbeidh na milliún ag muomh, go úsáideann siad an Gaeilge go rialta. Cur a géal náisiúnta, breig, a léiríonn an iarna, gur bhrálinn an Gaeilge a labhairt in our ire.
Ciara, thank you very much. That was brilliant. And now we'll turn to Pàdraig. I was interested in your route to language because slightly differently or the opposite to Ciara, you were brought up bilingually, but your education was through the medium of English.
Yes, and so something that was relatively common on the Isle of Lewis where I grew up. Before I went to school, I had both Gaelic and English and ate cúca and spoke about cúca in Gaelic. But by the time I went to primary school, look up cúca. I'm not going to go into what cúca is. It's terrible. It's sullen goose. By the time I went to primary school, that was entirely through the medium of English, apart from a couple of words here and there. And so there was this process when I was a little bit older in childhood of having to work on my own Gaelic, trying to recover this sense of absolute fluency that it had in my earliest years. And there's the strange thing throughout life then of having this almost ghost different existence where my life could have been entirely through the medium of Gaelic, but wasn't. And so then, as an adult, I've worked in Gaelic. I speak to my family in Gaelic, but at the same time, my English is more fluent than my Gaelic ever will be. I've got a PhD through the English language. I lectured at a university in English. And so the balancing between the two languages, what one can and can't say in each, and how you negotiate the different types of personality is interesting.
I've read in an interview with you recently when you discussed that actually, and the bilingualism, the literally the two languages in your mind, and in the context of translation, you described it as a form of tourism, which I think is very important in the context of our virtual visits to places, and that translation of Gaelic texts is obviously very important for a wider audience. But you also described the need to be quite strategic about it. I mean, without going into too much detail, can you talk a little bit about that and your view on your own experience with translating your own work?
I'm really interested, but slightly wary of translation. I owe huge amounts to translation, access to the literature of the world, to poetry in Spanish, in Irish, in Russian, and all of the other languages that I've been speaking. So I love reading translated text. I love also the glimpse into another culture that you get. I'm slightly wary about how superficial it might be, and this is partly where the link with tourism is, where you have this sense of experiencing a culture in a short period of time, or just in a very thin or narrow way. But there's nothing else that we can do. And especially at these moments when travel's slightly restricted, shall we say, translation might be one of the easier ways to actually try and get a sense of other cultures, other parts of the world, other people, other people's thoughts. But for a minority language like Gaelic, say, I think translation should be strategic to open up other avenues into the language, to see what different games you could play, what different types of fun you could have, and ideally to create bridges with other places, other types of writing, other ways of thinking. I once had a conversation with a language activist from Belfast, Aidan McPaulin, where I said that I had this dream of two people speaking in Gaelic, and they didn't have the shared language of English beneath them. So they had no fallback. They had to speak in Gaelic. He was a lot more realistic and said, well, I've got this dream of just two people speaking in Gaelic. And so in some ways, whatever we can do to keep the language being spoken, to keep the language evolving in interesting, playful, challenging ways, I think that's all to the good.
I think on that, your award-winning book of transgressive Gaelic poetry, and I read also that you once described what has been seen as a Gaelic attitude to sexuality as shortbready culture, very prim and proper and Presbyterian. And a similar question to Ciara, how do you think attitudes to Gaelic culture and poetry have changed over the years, or need to change perhaps?
I think it's important to differentiate between attitudes within Gaelic speaking communities and out with. And so the view of the Highlands has, for the last 150 years, Highlands of Scotland, been weirdly shortbready. So it's all of these prim maidens on hillsides and tartan or skirts or tweedy jackets. And here I am speaking tweed, so I can't really comment on that. But there's this view of this slightly Presbyterian or slightly prim, no sex happens in the Highlands. And we were slightly culpable of this ourselves because, for various cultural reasons, the 19th century was really not a fun century. And there was this cultural diminishment, this narrowing of options. And we forgot an awful lot of the rich literature that we had beforehand. And this is something both Ireland and Scotland share. The 18th century was a raucous, chaotic, and quite dirty in some ways century. And it's important for us to try and recognize that there were different attitudes to sexuality, different attitudes to the body in the pasts in our languages, in our cultures. And where we are just now, I think in Scotland in the last 20, 30 years, we've been a lot more willing to start talking about this publicly. there have always been songs shared, there have always been jokes or tales told, but there's been a bit more public discussion and sharing of them and rigorous academic debate of them than there had been previously.
So we'll all be looking at 18th century Scottish poetry after this event. So on that happy note, may we hear some of your poems, Pàdraig, please?
And so this first poem is one that came out of the conversations that I was having with Ciara and Ifor in Dublin. And one of the things that has always interested me about Irish and Welsh are, what am I jealous of? We've got lots of this cozy, warm attitudes between the Celtic languages going, oh, we're all friends here. But I was wondering if there's any other emotions connected to it, either jealousy or anger or fear. Do we actually fear the Irish language as Scottish Gaelic speakers? So this came out of that. It's called Féin Chomhanach, and it begins with some Twitter autocomplete, which is really relatively depressing. It says more about my Twitter than about the language. Féin Chomhanach Twitter. Ha gylwacam an rounds ac yn rounds ac yn rounds. Ha eid acam an rounds ac yn rounds ac yn rounds. Ha acalorum an rounds. Tri rutan hig gynieri. In chacol yn chedoch yn gyl. Joke. Mo albanoch cymroch as eranoch. Tri fienach yn fawl y ced beoch bronoch. Séfich an a féid, a capatich, a déichasiad, déiachasiad, déilees. Il dacam an estedfod, no dúf chodú ridú. Il acalorum in harfanacad, acaloron Ha gra chawad jarakat, stujian in the rutkan baka. Ha nuch ein chori bien ga tri acad, cur fan and scromac an orange and an pop-up gale toch tea. Even in gyr sio gybri, henya ska hana hunin no sheist, ha chrach mi gyfysyn giol. Gybi stofan patu ein gyr yn litrachig as a hiol, mari gyrlys rutacanoch, gyda hi crioch yn teul. Tri rutan a hi gynieri, in tiacol yn chedoch sy'n gyl, hi gwrs yn bi a fian as tu, gynacol is gymawl. Now, one of the things that I've been writing about or thinking about over the last couple of years is remoteness, being at a distance and what remoteness actually means. There's this horrible tendency for people to refer to the Western Isles of Scotland, say, as remote, whereas of course they are the centre of their own universe. But I think one of the interesting things is how we deal in this socially, medially connected world with being at quite a geographical remove from our families and our friends, and what this means for the lack of physical touch and for the reliance on technology. And I was writing about this for 3-4 years, and it seems to be relatively more important now since I've barely left the house in 3 weeks. And everything is done through new technologies. So this poem is called Common. Am bhathir fallaf an an hips. Is a fé microphone rash a mobile. Han jalan fiog leois. Scat vi gíisi mu bhawl a chomanach tris na luncheon chialki. Inish chaneli icher tors fiarsa migo. Schavor na chilmiga fech in a canyniac. A céit in a snaien dorach a torach sa valle. A brechig du worm and tleid gan trai is na tost. Shach is ho. Is na torchich in is lochre in a launrich ga tri. Har baban trushal is mulach an tall. I'm interested, by the way, when trying to write about Lewis or trying to write about my childhood at a distance. I'm reliant on memory, and my memory is terrible. And so quite a lot in my poems have been trying to explore ways in which I can find a path back into particular childhood moments or particular childhood words. Some of them are true, some of them are slightly wrong. But this is a poem that was exploring that process of trying to work out how you go back in time to get back to the present. Mahauríon go fada seo. Mahauríon go fada seo, is cainte chun dúra íostar baic, gus rád na máine gáil, seachat ar an loch sa chranág tro na mulan an gaie. Stáisiún na máinteach go fear an bí na Clondaikers, go bra arach ar fear chosta. From the Hurred Fakal, let the Vala Drama Lan Evain Doige, Package Space Raiders, British Corduroy, Catalog Freemans is Great Universal, Faklan Malach Krusnochs Germochjoch, Njorgens Fenasel. Strahage Optic, Jelichen Train Gian, Heknjolas Computer Satchel, Frische Kaskanaster agus Doublethink, Hur Lorok and Trad Shaw, Sraj Vala Lan Scuttle. Chaiser te bhfuil an doris, bír an baich gag a le chaile dul tóhal an tafanar, an sa haar, an an neachtaí chutir le haar. Mahauríon go fada seo is cainte chun de garcha cultúr cóú, de chan an na bhalas sa rás sa ciad chóra fachrecht na chunarst, gurút gan colachrí caint de bhahar, rút gan ar an óiolach o doige, sa acat rí atseach an an tas an siar chiarí nach de gúascail ó héin in na huid a gine sa bhíad a géirí. Bhí de chrach gan na bhrochla bhuascanan, cain is cintas an peci nach a dain na acsan in na an tolis. Ach seo ule surangud cehu amach, mae germo mór mwyd byc, mae rhan go fata seo ar jens go bhí déiligich, di launch an fysgulche mae jaran, gan bhí súlachach an cór. Dig siachat na ha cwrs, na ha rei, a rhan go fata seo, sy'n fata go ior.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you very much. And now we'll move over to Ifor. Ifor, you also had a slightly unusual route to your own mamiaith or mother tongue, in that you spent most of your childhood and formative years living in London. What was the experience of growing up in a Welsh-speaking household with a very London youth and social life?
For me, it was quite normal being brought up speaking Welsh in London, not least of all because that was the experience of my father and my Mckee, or my grandmother, before me. They were both born and brought up in London, and indeed lived in London for all their lives. So if we count in as well my great-grandfather, who moved to London in 1886, I'm the fourth generation of Welsh-speaking Londoners in our family. And of course there was a very strong London Welsh community in existence, and there still is, of course. Most of my oldest and best friends are from a similar kind of Welsh-speaking London background. When I was growing up, there were still 40 chapels where you could worship through the medium of Welsh in London. There was and there still is, a rugby club, a social club, any amount of societies. But one thing that certainly kept me fluent in the language was the fact that all our Easter holidays and summer holidays would be spent in Wales, either with my maternal grandparents in Llanrwst or with my father's relations in Pontrhyfyndigedd. So that kept me connected to the communities where the language flourished, and also kept me aware of some of the threats facing those communities, and it made me perhaps more politically engaged. And that was certainly a factor in my decision subsequently to go to Cardiff to pursue university education and study Welsh literature and Welsh history. And that subsequently led me on to my day job of being a documentary maker.
And subsequently became the National Poet of Wales. And this role has taken you all around the world, and you've undertaken many commissions for significant and notable events and anniversaries. Why do you think poetry for us in Wales, or for all our countries, is such an important medium for us to mark occasions like these? And what has been your particular highlight as National Poet of Wales so far?
Well, Wales is one of many countries that now have a national poet or a laureate. from Belgium and Scotland to Canada, North Korea. And there are also a number of smaller communities or smaller interest groups that also have a laureate. I'm thinking of the state laureates in the United States, or the county laureates in England, and they're actually there's a laureate for canals and a laureate for pets as well. I think what all these posts have in common is a feeling that we need somebody to speak for us, and also perhaps a feeling that poetry can reach parts of the social experience that other media, where other media perhaps falter a little bit. So poetry can not only speak for us, but also perhaps speak more directly to us, or speak to us in different ways. As to the highlights, well, I'm glad to say there have been a few. I might include reading poems to inmates at Europe's largest prison in Wrexham, working with Syrian refugees in Bangor, or reading poetry by the light of my cell phone during a power cut in Yaoundé, in the Cameroonian capital. But if I had to choose one, I'd probably plump for having a poem chosen to be projected on the side of Big Ben. Now, I'm a Welshman, but I was brought up in London, so to see my home language recognised and given that status on the side of one of the major public buildings in my hometown was certainly quite uplifting. But it was also an acknowledgement, I think, that London, of course, is a multicultural city. Welsh is part of that multicultural weave. So I like to think that that also acknowledged the fact that there are many of us who are British citizens, because I have to call myself that. You can't quite see the Yes Cymru t-shirt there. For whom English is not our first language, but we also have our place. We also are important.
The Mother Tongue event we're doing today is part, as we've described, a sort of a broader conversation about poetry, language and mother tongues, if you like. And it was a project that you initiated last year because of the UNESCO Year of Indigenous Languages, based on a very innovative idea between you and the prestigious theatre director Ian Rowlands. However, recent events have meant that the progress of this particular project has had to be put on hold right now. But can you tell us a little bit about the ambitions for this project and what it's been like to work with Ciara and Pàdraig?
Certainly. Well, Ian Rowlands and I have worked together many times over the last 20 years and produced a number of projects for television and for theatre. And several of these involve the juxtaposition of the Welsh language with other European languages, Irish in particular. Now, this time, what we wanted to do was to take that and to make it central to the proposed presentation, which would be a stage show with lighting, with projection, with music, that would set poems in Welsh, Irish, and Scots Gaelic in a wider context. We were keen to challenge the perception of the Celtic fringe, as it were, the idea that we who speak these other strange languages are part of. We exist on the edges of a norm, somebody else's norm, the norm of the norm of the English language, and that is something we all have in common. We all live in states that are dominated by the English language. Of course, I'm aware that Irish is the first language of the Republic, but I think in practical terms the situations are quite similar. So we wanted to relocate our languages within a wider European context, to rather than be seen as deviating from an English norm, but in fact be part of a European norm, be part of the 40 million speakers of European languages whose language is not the primary language of the state. The first step, therefore, was to build up a network of interest in the project, and then to recruit fellow travellers for this journey. And it was great to begin working with Ciara and with Pàdraig in Dublin earlier this year. But of course, then we were overtaken by events, and things are temporarily on hold. Shows have had to be cancelled or postponed for later on in the year. But hopefully it'll be back on track and running once more before the end of this year.
Well, I'm really pleased to hear that. So it's your turn, Ifor, to read us some of your poems.
Well, the first poem I'd like to read is a nod to my upbringing in London. One of the institutions that I didn't mention earlier is the Ysgol Gymraeg Llundain, the Welsh school in London. And it's had many homes over the years, over the last 60 years of its existence. And between 2000 and 2015, it shared premises with Stonebridge School, a very multicultural London primary where I believe 27 languages were spoken. So the addition of Welsh was no big deal. The building was a stone's throw away from the main line from London to North Wales. The Welsh School in London has occupied something of a linguistic catch-22 for much of its existence, because the English education authorities won't fund it because it doesn't follow the national curriculum for England. Well, of course it doesn't. It teaches through the medium of Welsh, and therefore it's following the national curriculum for Wales. However, the Welsh education authorities can't fund it either, because their authority does not extend beyond the borders of Wales, or it didn't at that time. I'm glad to say that anyway, that the school still continues and is now in receipt of funding. Cymraeg Llundain. Mae trena o fama'n dyrnu mynd tua'n gwlad, ond y beicalw sy'n rhedeg fel trydan trwy'n iaith ni'r plant. Mond trena lleol sy'n stopio fan hyn, ac felly daw'r Gymraeg I Stonebridge. Iaith rhyw ddeuoliaeth nad adweinwn fel deuoliaeth. Nid deilan yn disgyn mewn coedwig ddiglistia, nid esgyrn eira rhyw oes a ddu, nid trydar gwynoliaid a hithan nosi, nid sŵn un llawn clapio, mor iaith Gymraeg fyma, ond yr hyn sydd yn normal I ni. Ni yw'r glaswellt yn ei gynddaredd dan styllod sglein yr adran addysg. Ni yw'r 20 miliwn dwyieithog yn blera ffinia gwladwriaethau Ewrop. Ni yw'r lleiafrifoedd llafar, yn adfeddiannu'r ddinas oedd unwaith bua'r byd, yn creu byd newydd i'n hunain, achos bellach y byd bua Llundain. Diolch yn fawr, Garmhagydd. Well, with the second poem, we move back to Wales. In the rural heartlands of the language, the last 50 years have seen a continuing exodus of our young people because of the lack of employment opportunities, but at the same time, we've also seen continuing inflow of people from across the border and the growth of second homes. Both these things have contributed to the erosion of the language. Now, in this poem, you're going to hear a common greeting, simai, which means hello or how are you. And in this poem, it's a greeting, not return. So it's a poem about a brief encounter. Mond gwenu nath I, Yn drais y bôn drwsiadus wrth dywys I Merlin drwy'r giat. Roedd hi'n fore teg o fai. A'r blagur yn ffrwydro, a mina'n coedio mynd wrth I litani'r murddunod na fedrai ond un iaith I codi ganu ar fy nhafod. Am y gwyddwn. Bod y ceian cyd anadlu am mi, bod y coed yn erfyn I mi gnita danynt, am I bod hi'n fore teg o fai. A dyma'r ferch yn troi i'w thyddyn a'i Merlin yn ei chanlyn, a mina'n ei chyfarch a sumai. Mond gwenu nath hi. Rhwng swildod ac aniall. Ac yn yr eiliad anghyfiaeth honno, dyma fi'n stondio am fod canodd a miloedd o wena tebyg yn cerdded yn dawel dan wyneb ein diwylliant, yn sych bydru beunydd. Ac eto, mond gwenu nath hi. Well, this last poem was commissioned by the Welsh Government to mark the Welsh launch of the UNESCO International Year of Indigenous Languages. And as it seems that the majority of the 7,000 languages currently spoken in the world are likely to disappear during the current century, the present century, it's appropriate perhaps that this poem opens with a quotation in a language that is no longer spoken, i.e. Latin. So here is lleisio. Nomina si pereunt perit et cognitio rerum. Os derfydd enwa, derfydd hefyd dirnad petha. Dwedwch felly fawrion o wybodaeth, ym mha fodd mae achub iaith. Nid trwy chofnodi, neu chysegru, na chloi geiriau'n gac y Mckee gludiog a lynon sgwennu'r sawl sy'n stelcian hyd ein cloddia. Cant cadno wedi stwffio yw pob Cymraeg llyfr. Ei introed oediog ni syfla mwy, a'i lygyd gwydyr sydd ddall. Yn y llafar, mae ei lleifer. A thyfod y plant, yw ei pharhad. Gan ymhagydd.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Ifor. And thank you to all the brilliant poets today, Ifor, Ciara and Pàdraig. I'm sure you all agree it's been just wonderful just to hear a little smattering of the work that they do, and I hope that kind of opens your curiosity to find out more, not just about these poets, but other poets in these extremely incredibly important languages that we have between us. And it's such a breath of fresh air to hear the language living, breathing in these contemporary forms. And just before closing, I'd like to thank Literature Wales's partners in this wonderful event, the British Council Wales, British Council Ireland, the Welsh Government and the Arts Council of Wales. And of course, a very big thank you to Sasha and her incredible team at the Cwrt Festival for inviting us to take part. And to you, the audience, for tuning in. Remember to watch the rest of this wonderful festival today and all until Saturday. Diolch yn fawr iawn and keep safe, everybody.